morning, students and friends. In the last session, we are discussing the chapter number 2, sexual reproduction in flowering plants. I just go in a brief what we have finished in the previous sessions. Until now, we have finished different parts of a flower, a sexual reproductive organ of a plant. We have also discussed in detail structure of stamen and carpel and their processes like microsporogenesis and megasporogenesis. We have also discussed the formation of pollen grain and embryo sac. Apart from that, we have also discussed the pollination process and the pollinating agents. And now we have to today discuss an important topic. It is called as outbreeding devices. What is an outbreeding devices? You know the various types of pollination. There are different types of pollination. You know that self-pollination and cross-pollination. Self-pollination includes autogamy and geitonogamy, whereas the cross-pollinations, that means a transfer of pollen grain to another flower of another plant. This is called as a cross-pollination. Now, usually you know that most of the flowers are bisexual. Suppose for an example, if you consider this is a flower. This is a flower. That flower contains both sexual organ, a male sexual organ, what we call it as stamen, and the another one is female sexual organ, what we call it as carpel. So in this case, what are the chances? The chances are very high that the pollen grain which is liberated from an anther of a stamen that will fall onto a stigma or a carpel of same flower, what we call it as autogamy. The chances of autogamy is very high, okay, and that may lead to a self-pollination, because the autogamy is a type of a self-pollination, okay. Now if one time occur, not problem, second time occur, there is no problem, but if this continuously occur, that may causes inbreeding depression. What it causes? Inbreeding depression. Okay. So the continuous self-pollination means the transfer of pollen grain of anther to a stigma or a carpel of same flower of same plant means autogamy. Continuous self-pollination that results into a inbreeding depression. And so that's why there are chances that they may develop a genetic disorders, or the higher variety or the good variety of a fruit cannot be produced due to a continuous inbreeding, okay, and that may lead to inbreeding depression. So plant adopt a certain technique which prevent self-pollination and they promote or encourage cross-pollination, okay, that is called as outbreeding devices. So what is the outbreeding devices? The outbreeding devices, it prevents inbreeding. How it prevents inbreeding? It do something by which a self-pollination is discouraged or inhibited, or it do something by which cross-pollination is promoted or encouraged. This is called as outbreeding devices. In short, the outbreeding devices are the strategies or the devices which is adopted by a plant which discourage self-pollination and which encourage cross-pollination. This should not happen, because if this happens, self-pollination happens, then it may lead to inbreeding depression. Okay, so what are the strategies they are adopted by a plant which prevent the self-pollination and promote a cross-pollination? So we go ahead. What are the strategies adopted by the different plant? So let's discuss. The first strategy which is adopted in an outbreeding device is dichogamy. This is the first strategy which is adopted by a plant which prevent self-pollination or encourage the cross-pollination, or it is a kind of a outbreeding devices which prevents a inbreeding. Here in a flower, suppose assume that this is a flower. Usually most of the plants has a bisexual flower, that means hermaphrodites. They possess both sexual organ. Okay, this is a stamen and this is the another sexual organ, the female sexual organ, what we call it as carpel. Okay, now what happens? You know that in a sexual reproduction, every living organism doesn't start to produce the gametes from the birth itself, but they need a certain period of a growth before they become a mature. Like say example for us, that's easy understanding. Human being cannot reproduce from the birth. Can they reproduce from birth? No. After attaining certain age, means after they become mature, then and then they can become capable of reproducing sexually. Similarly, this is also a plant which reproduces sexually. So it does not, the plant does not reproduce sexually from the birth itself. It needs a certain type of a growth. But the growth of male sexual organ and the female sexual organ in dichogamy is not synchronized. It's not synchronized. Means either of the organ, either stamen or the carpel, they become mature first and the other organ becomes mature later on. Means the maturation process of these two organs doesn't become synchronized, or it do not occur at the same time. Okay, here in this flower, they do not mature at the same time. Both the organs do not mature at the same time. Let's say one example. Suppose assume that this stamen becomes a mature. So it starts to produce the pollen grain. Pollen grain is produced. Okay, but here this carpel is not mature. So the stigma of this carpel is not become a receptive. Means it is not capable to accept a pollen grain. So this is first case. But the first case where pollen grain is released. When that is released? When the anther becomes a mature or the stamen becomes mature, but the stigma is not receptive. In short, in other term, if you want to say that the male sexual organ has started to produce the gametes, but the female sexual organ at the same time has not started to produce the gametes. Means the pollen grain which is released from it is not capable of fertilizing the ovary of the same flower, and that prevent inbreeding or self-pollination, and that promotes a cross-pollination. So here the pollen grain becomes a mature, but the stigma doesn't become a mature when the pollen grain is mature, and that is observed in case of sunflower. This is a one strategy what it adopts in a dichogamy. The other possibility is that carpel becomes a mature, but the stamen doesn't become a mature at the same time. See, in the first case what we have seen? In the first case we have seen stamen matures, but at the same time carpel doesn't be a mature. Now in the second case, the carpel now mature, but the stamen is not mature. Barabar? So here you can say that stigma becomes receptive, means mature before pollen grain released. Before pollen grain is going to be released. Okay, so this is going to be happen, and that occurs in the case of a papaya plant. Okay, so this is called as dichogamy. Here in a dichogamy, the maturation process of stamen and carpel is not synchronized. One of the organ becomes mature first. Like in the first case, the pollen grain becomes released, but stigma doesn't be a receptive. This is occurs in the case of sunflower. In the another case, the carpel or the stigma becomes a receptive, but at the time the pollen grain is not released. Or the much before time of pollen grain release, the stigma becomes a receptive. This is called, that is happened in the case of papaya. Ultimately, either of the organ becomes a mature first, and so that's why they prevent self-pollination and promote cross-pollination. This is one of the strategy adopted by it. So this is called as outbreeding devices. Okay, a first strategy which is adopted by it. Now the second strategy which is adopted by a plant as an outbreeding device is difference in the length of reproductive organs. Like see, this is a flower. Now there is a difference in the length. Of two sexual organs. This is a stamen and this is a carpel. Due to a too much difference in the length of reproductive organ, male reproductive organ and the female reproductive organ, the chances of pollination is very less. So this is the another strategy which is adopted by outbreeding devices. Okay, so where there is a difference in the length, they are not at a same length or similar length or approximately similar length, but the difference between the length of male reproductive organ and the female reproductive organ is too much. Like see here, there is a difference in the length of both the organ is too much, and that prevent inbreeding and promote outbreeding. Okay, so this is the second strategy which is adopted by it. Third strategy, it is a genetic mechanism. The third strategy, or you can also call it as self-sterility. What happens in the self-sterility? It is a kind of a genetic mechanism. In this genetic mechanism, what is going to happen that here the pollen grain might going to be released. This is a flower. Anther, and this is a carpel. Now here the pollen grain gets released, even it falls on the stigma. Okay, but the stigma identify that it is a self pollen, it is my own pollen. So the further process, what we call it as pollen pistil interaction, that we will learn today how this happens. Pollen pistil interaction, the further process does not start. It identify that this is self pollen, it's my own pollen, and so that's why it prevents a further fertilization process. This is called as a genetic mechanism. It identifies the self. If the pollen grain which falls on the stigma is a self pollen or its own pollen, then it prevents a pollen pistil interaction or the further fertilization process. Okay, so this is called as self-sterility, and that is observed in case of a plant, what we call it as malva. Okay, in which case it's observed? It's observed into a malva. I also give you example where there is a difference in the length of reproductive organ. I have not given you, I am now giving you the example. This is a plant where you can find the differences in the length of sexual reproductive organ. The example is primula. Okay, so we have discussed the three strategies. Dipogamy, where the maturity process of male and female reproductive organ is not synchronized. They become mature at different time interval. Okay. Second, a differences in the length of reproductive organs. Example, primula. Third, self-sterility. It is shown in a malva. It's a kind of a genetic mechanism. The fourth strategy, which is adopted as an outbreeding device, is instead of producing bisexual flower, they produces unisexual flower. Usually whatever we have seen, because most of the times the plant has a bisexual flower possessing both sexual organ, but now some plants starts to produce the unisexual flower, means the flower which possess only either stamen or carpel. Okay, this is called as a unisexual flower. But in unisexual flower there are two circumstances. See, you know that, suppose assume that this is a plant. and this is a flower. Now this plant possesses the unisexual flower. Means this is male flower, this is male flower, assume that this is female flower. Now what you call it as? We have learned it. The same plant, it possesses unisexual flower, means a flower which possesses only either stamen or carpel. If it possesses stamen, then what we call it as male flower. If it possesses flower, then it's called as a female flower. Okay. If both the male and female flower are present on the same, this is called as monoecious. Monoecious plant. Clear? So here what happens? The pollen grain which is released from the male flower doesn't fertilize because it doesn't have a female organ. Female organ is absent in only male flower. But it can fertilize the female flower which is present on the same plant. Okay? That means it prevents autogamy. Autogamy does not happen. But geitonogamy is not prevented in case of monoecious plant. So it prevents autogamy, prevented in case of monoecious plant, but geitonogamy not prevented. You know the example of monoecious plant, what we have discussed, like for example coconut, or you can say castor, cucurbita. These are the monoecious plant. So in this monoecious plant, castor, cucurbita, or you can say that coconut, the autogamy gets prevented, but the geitonogamy doesn't get prevented. Okay, this is one case. The another case is a dioecious plant. Dioecious plant is a plant where all the flowers are of same type. This is the plant which possesses only male flower, and this is the another plant of same species that possesses only female flower. This is a condition called as dioecious. So if you compare the dioecious plant, like for an example papaya or date palm, in this case the autogamy is also prevented. Autogamy. This is no chances because all the flowers are male flowers. And even geitonogamy is also prevented. Both gets prevented. Okay. Geitonogamy is also prevented in this. Okay. In monoecious autogamy gets prevented, but the geitonogamy doesn't get prevented. In dioecious plant, autogamy gets prevented as well as geitonogamy can also prevent it. This is a fourth strategy which is adopted by a plant. You should know the examples. In monoecious plant, the examples are castor, coconut, cucurbita, and the dioecious plant, the examples are palm tree or date palm tree and the papaya tree. Okay, where two different plants are present and which the male and female flowers are present on two different plants. Okay, so ultimately these four strategies are adopted by a plant as an outbreeding devices. So which are the strategy? I just discussed with examples, and they are important in MCQ point of view as well as in a theory point of view. It is important short note, outbreeding devices. So if you know that most of the plants are bisexual or they possess the bisexual flower, so the chances of self-pollination is very high. But if self-pollination continues, then it causes an inbreeding depression, and to prevent it, the plant adopts certain strategies or devices. These devices are called as outbreeding devices. Outbreeding devices prevent self-pollination, promote cross-pollination. So first is dipogamy. In dipogamy, the maturity of stamen and carpel becomes at different time interval. Like for an example, first example. Stamen becomes a mature, but the carpel doesn't be a mature at the same time. Means pollen grain is released, but the stigma doesn't be a receptive in the case of sunflower. Second one is stigma becomes a receptive, but the pollen grain is not released at the same time. Here the female part becomes a mature, but the male part is not mature. Like for in the case of a papaya plant. Second one is there is a difference in the length of male and female. So there is a high distance between them, and that prevent a self-pollination which is observed in case of primula plant. Third, self-sterility. Means here the pollen grain is released, it falls on stigma, but the stigma will identify that it is a self-pollen and prevents a further process. So it is a genetic mechanism which identifies the self-pollen, its own, and that happens in the case of malva. And the fourth strategy is production of unisexual flower instead of bisexual flower. In unisexual flower, two types of a plant, monoecious and dioecious plant. In monoecious plant, autogamy gets prevented, but geitonogamy doesn't get prevented. In dioecious, autogamy and geitonogamy both gets prevented. Like in monoecious plant, the examples are cucurbita, coconut, castor, or you can say maize. And the dioecious plant, it is a papaya plant and the date palm tree. Okay, they are the examples of dioecious plant. So that's all about outbreeding devices. Okay, understood? Now we move ahead with another topic. Suppose assume that the pollen is transferred, means pollination occurs. That is done with the help of pollination agents. What happens afterwards? Means pollen grain falls on the stigma. What happens afterward? And that is called as pollen pistil interaction. So let's start with another topic. This is again an important topic. So you have to focus. Pollen pistil interaction. How there is an interaction between a pollen grain and the pistil. I draw a diagram of a pistil. You know that pistil can also be called as carpel because you have heard the name carpel. But that carpel can also be called as a pistil. You know that the pistil or carpel possesses the three parts. First is called as stigma, a tube-like portion is called as style, and the last bulged portion is called as ovary. This is the part. Within an ovary there is a presence of ovule. Okay, I just draw a schematic diagram. We have also seen the structure of this ovule. But you know that in the ovule there is a one place where there is an absence or there is a presence of a pore. What we call it as micropyle. This is an end. What we call it as micropyle. I am not drawing the whole structure, just showing the cells which is present at the micropyle. You already know that there are three cells which is present at the micropyle. Three cells which are present at the chalazal end. You know that this end is called as chalaza. And in the center there is a presence of two cells. Okay. Now the cells which is present at the chalazal end, what is its name? It's called as antipodal cells. These all things we have learned during the structure of ovule. The cell which is present at micropylar end, it is one egg cell, total three cells, one egg cell plus two synergid cells. Okay, total three cells, one egg cell and two synergid cells that is present at the micropylar end. In the center, initially two nuclei, they become fused together and forms a one single nucleus, that is a polar nucleus. Sorry, it is a polar nucleus. So now the 8 cell becomes a 7 cell and 8 nucleate. That we have already learned during the structure of megasporangium and during a process called as megasporogenesis. Okay, just recall that thing I have listed out. Okay, now what happens afterwards? Now we have to start with pollen pistil interaction. Means the pollen grain falls onto a stigma. Assume that this pollen grain has fallen. Either it came from the same flower, or it came from the another flower of same plant, or it may came from the another flower of another plant. Okay, that means either it's a autogamy, or it is geitonogamy, or it is allogamy or the cross pollination. Pollen grain falls. Once the pollen grain falls, what happens or what are the processes occurs? So the interaction which occurs between a pollen grain and pistil or carpel, the interaction which occurs between the pollen grain and the pistil after the pollen grain falls onto a stigma, that interactions are called as pollen pistil interaction. Or how they communicate, pollen grain and pistil, how they communicate or how they interact, that interaction or communication is called as pollen pistil interaction. Okay. Now what happens? Once the pollen grain falls onto a stigma of a carpel, the pistil or the carpel will identify whether it is compatible pollen or it is incompatible pollen. In other words, I can say that whether it is a right pollen or is it a wrong pollen. It identifies. These are the somewhat difficult word to understand, but this is the very easy word. Right pollen and the wrong pollen. Okay? Means the pollen grain which falls. Assume that this is a carpel of papaya plant. There are two possibilities. It may happen that the pollen grain which is falls on this stigma may be a pollen grain of papaya plant. This is the one possibility. Second possibility is that the pollen grain which is falls on this stigma may be a pollen grain of some another plant. Like for an example, say a mango plant. Clear? So that is, if it is a same plant, then you can say compatible or you can say right pollen. Okay? And if it is of another plant, then it is called as an incompatible, means it's a wrong pollen. Because where the pollen grain falls in the nature, because the process occurs naturally and the process can be achieved by the agents like abiotic agents and the biotic agents. Means suppose assume that the butterfly will take this pollen grain from a papaya plant. Is it necessary that that butterfly only visit the papaya plant? That can also visit the certain other plants apart from a papaya plants, like it may visit a banyan tree or it may visit a mango tree or it may visit the palm tree or etc. It may go to any plant. It is not decided that it will only go to a papaya plant. Okay, so the pollen grain of this papaya plant may be taken over to some another plant, like for example mango plant. So the pollen grain which falls on it, it identifies whether it is a compatible or it is a incompatible. Okay. Okay, that means it says that whether it is a right pollen or it is a wrong pollen. Okay. Next, if it is a right pollen, means if it is a compatible, then the pollen pistil interaction starts. Means the further process goes on. If it is a incompatible, then the pistil or the carpel reject the pollen grain. Clear? If it is a compatible, then it accepts the pollen grain. If it is incompatible, then it is rejects the pollen grain. Okay, clear? So this is very basic thing. When the pollen grain falls onto a stigma or a carpel, the plant or the carpel will identify whether it is a self pollen or you can say compatible pollen or incompatible pollen. If it is a compatible pollen or the right pollen, the pistil will accept it. If it is an incompatible or the wrong pollen, then pistil will reject it. Okay? If it rejects it, now you know that further process does not occur. But if it accepts, then what happens, that we will see. Okay? One case I have explained you that the pollen grain of papaya plant may falls onto a stigma of a papaya plant. This is one possibility. Second possibility that pollen grain of mango plant may fall onto a stigma of a papaya plant. So in the first case, compatible, it will accept. In the second case, means if it is a pollen of mango plant and the carpel of a mango papaya plant, then it will reject it. Okay, I again repeat, if it is a pollen grain of mango plant and if it is a carpel or pistil of a papaya plant, then it will reject, because these are the two different plants. But even the pollen grain of same plant and of same flower then also gets rejected. But that what we don't have to discuss over here. We have already discussed in the previous session what we call it as outputting devices. Okay. So if it is compatible, then it accepts. If it is incompatible, then reject. So just I summarize. Okay. Then we go ahead. So what is pollen pistil interaction? The interaction between a pistil and pollen, it is called as pollen pistil interaction. In a nature, there is no guarantee that the pollen grain falls on the same flower or the same plant. Okay. So first, once it falls, the stigma or carpel or pistil identify whether it is a compatible pollen grain or incompatible pollen grain. If it is a compatible pollen grain, then it will accept it. If it is an incompatible pollen grain, then it will reject it. Okay. If there is a rejection, no, there is further communication. If it accepts, then the communication continues. Okay. So how this communication occurs? I am just drawing a bigger picture of pollen grain. This pollen grain I have shown as a bigger picture. You know that pollen grain, the cell wall of pollen grain has a two layer, exine and intine. If you remember, exine is made up of sporopollen, intine is made up of cellulose and pectin. But there is a place where the sporopollen is absent. This is called as germ pole. What's called as germ pole. Now, once it accepts, then there is a development of a pollen tube. This is called as pollen tube. Development of pollen tube from pollen grain like this. Say this is germ pole. Now there is a development of a tube-like structure. Okay, this tube-like structure which develop from a pollen grain at a germ pole. From this place, the development of a tube develops, and that is called as a pollen tube. Okay, so now there is a development of a pollen tube. Okay, now you know that what the pollen grain consists of. Pollen grain, if you remember, the pollen grain consists of, one is bigger cell, what we call it as vegetative cell, and the other one is smaller cell, what we call it as generative cell. Remember what we have learned in the structure of pollen grain. Pollen grain is made up of two cells, vegetative cell and the generative. Bigger one is called as vegetative cell and the generative cell. In 60% of the angiosperm or the flowering plant, the pollen grain is released at this stage. So the cells which is present in the pollen grain, vegetative cells and the generative cells, that goes in a tube. So the cells, I am just drawing a bigger picture over here. The cell goes over there. Robert, cell enters into what? Cell enters into a pollen tube. Okay. So these are the vegetative cells and the generative cells which comes over here. Okay. Now what happens from this vegetative and generative cells? The generative cell, this generative cells. Okay, one generative cell. Divide further and it forms two male gametes. Like I am drawing over here. This is a one vegetative cell contains and these are the generative cell which divides. The generative cell which divides, that what we call it as male gamete. So from two cells, now it becomes a three cells. How much? Three cells. Because the generative cells divides and it forms two male gametes. Ultimately, how many cells are there? Three cells. One vegetative and the two male gametes are formed. These two male gametes are formed from the generative cells. Okay. Now it converts to a generative cell. Okay. So at that time, that cell gets released into a pollen tube. This is a one case. In a second case, the pollen grain is already three cell and that is going to be released. In whatever the case, ultimately three cells are present in a pollen tube. One vegetative cell and the two male gametes are produced. Now this pollen grain that grows and enlarges and it grows towards a ovule. Now it enters into a ovule through a micropilar region. Through which region it enters into a ovule? It enters through a micropilar region. And the cells which is present in it, it is also migrating. It migrates. And it also enters into an ovule. Okay. Now here, the entry of this, how it comes to know that, the pollen tube comes to know that I have to enter from this place only. The entry of that is guided by filiform apparatus. The filiform apparatus of synergid cell, they will guide the entry of pollen tube into a ovule or megasporangium through a micropilar end that will guide the entry. And whatever the content, these three cells gets released into a ovule. Okay, and this is called as pollen pistil interaction. What it is called? Pollen pistil interaction. I summarize the theory. What is pollen pistil interaction? It is interaction between a pollen and pistil. It's called as a pollen pistil interaction. In a nature, there is no guarantee that the pollen grain falls on the compatible plant. Okay, so the pollen grain which is falls onto a pistil or a carpet may be either compatible or incompatible. If it is compatible, then it will accept it. If it is incompatible, then it will reject it. Okay. If it reject, further process does not occur. If it accepts, then there is an interaction or communication between the pollen grain and the pistil. This interaction or communication occurs with the help of chemicals. What we know today, we know that how they communicate. It's not through a cell phone. It's through a release of chemicals or release of hormones between the pollen and the pistil. Thus they communicate. So if it is compatible, then it will accept it. Once it accepts it, there is a development of a pollen tube. Okay. Now the pollen tube grows on, and the cells which is present in the pollen tube, there is a vegetative cell and the generative cells, they gets released into a pollen tube. One, that is a two cell state. One vegetative and second one is generative. These two cells are released into a pollen tube. Now from this two cell, vegetative cell remains as such, but the generative cell again divides by mitosis and it forms two male gametes. So now the pollen tube has three cells, two male gamete and one vegetative cell. Here the generative cell has divided into male gamete and the one vegetative cell. So total three cells are released. In certain plants, like 40% of the plant, already there is a release of three cells, one vegetative and two male gamete. In whatever the case, either two cell or three cell, ultimately the cell which is formed into a pollen tube are three cells. And which are the three cells in a pollen tube? One vegetative and two male gametes. Now the pollen tube continue to grow and it enters into a ovule or microsporangium, through which end it enters through a micropylar end. The entry of this pollen tube into an ovule through a micropylar end is guided by a filiform apparatus of synergy cells. And whatever the content present in pollen tube, you know that what is the content of pollen tube? Pollen tube contains these three cells, one vegetative and two male gamete. They are released into a ovule, and this is called as pollen pistil interaction. Once released, what happens, that we will see in the next session. Okay, so today we will just discuss two topics, outbreeding devices, and the second one is pollen pistil interaction. These two topics are very important regarding to an examination point of view. So all of you have to prepare. Okay, so in next session we see how or what kind of a fertilization or how fertilization process takes place. Till then, keep watching, like the video, subscribe the video. Thank you for watching.